All right. So, today I'm just continuing reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Oh, do I have no connection? I am no connection. It says I'm live, but it also says I'm not. All right. Anyway, I'm continuing a reading of Thomas Paine. The the all the founding fathers favorite guy. They all seem to write about him, and I just figured with all the things going on in the States right now that I should be going back, looking at some of these historic writings of some of these the founding fathers said, and see what they were thinking, and compare it to how people are talking about how America should be today. And so I'm just gonna go through this. If anybody wants to jump in there, talk about it, I am down and good with that. All right, but first bit I was reading through yesterday. He was kind of just talking about basically how he thought governments formed, people formed governments, and how they evolved over time. Then the second part was about how the flaws with monarchy, specifically the English monarchy, has with being able to represent people, and the is more really like a takedown a lot of the defenses of the day of people had of monarchies in the 1700s of these are the reasons why we need monarchy, and he kind of just goes through and kind of breaks those down. And this section I'm going over through today are the thoughts on the present state of American affairs, and he'd be writing the 75. So this is before things are getting really hot, but pretty much right in the middle of stuff. Of all the when exactly was Lexington and Concord? That would have been the first things are getting hot. April 1775. So he's writing this basically at the same time. Essentially at the same time. All right. In the following pages, I offer nothing more than simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense. Oh, that's the title. And have no other preliminaries to settle with the reader than that he will divest himself of prejudice and oh God, man, I am such a bad reader. I know this word. I'm so bad at
prepossession,
and suffer his reason and his feelings to determine for themselves that he will put on, or rather that he will not put off, the true character of man, and generously enlarge his views beyond the present day. So this is he's just pleading with the reader. He's like, all right, leave your preconceptions at the door, just listen to the arguments. I know he even talks about this earlier, about how he's like, time is the biggest thing to change people's minds. Usually these arguments are just seeds, and it's usually time that convinces people of these things. All right, volumes have been written on the subject of the struggle between England and America. Men of all ranks have embarked in the controversy from different motives and with various design, but all have been ineffectual, and the period of debate is closed. Arms, the last resource, decide the contest. The appeal was the choice of the king, and the continent has accepted the challenge. Okay, so I was wrong. This is not right before, guys. This is as things are going hot. These are like Lexington, Concord. People are grabbing arms. Militias are forming. All right. It hath been reported of the late Pelham, in parentheses, who thou an able minister was not without his faults, that on his being attacked in the House of Commons on the score that his measures were only the temporary kind, replied, "They will not last my time. Should a thought so fatal and unmanly possess the colonies in the present contest, the name of ancestors will be remembered by future generations with detestation. Detestation. Is it detestation or detestation? Detestation.
Detestation.
Detestations. Okay. So I'm not sure who is Mr. Pelham. I will come back to that. That is something else to research at another time. But it sounds like he was a minister in the House of Commons. But this seems like a personal dig at Mr. Pelham. The sun never shined on the cause of greater worth. 'Tis not the affair of a city, a country, a province, or a kingdom, but of a continent, of at least 1/8 the part of the habitable globe. 'Tis not the concern of a day, a year, or an age. Prosperity are virtually involved in the... I need to highlight this so I don't keep losing my spot. It's just a lot harder to read on the screen. And will be more or less affected even to the end of time by the proceedings now. Now is the seed time of the continental union, faith and honor. The least fracture now will be a name engraved with the point of a pen on the tender rind of a young oak. The wound would enlarge with the trees, and the prosperity read in the full-grown characters. Okay. I know I'm stopping a lot, but I want to have time to digest and see if anybody wants to jump in and talk about things either. All right, the sun never shined on. So this is flowery language that this is important. But this is not just some little things. This is the whole continent of essentially North America. Fates are being decided. That's where the dramatic music will start playing. By referring the matter from argument to arms, a new era for politics is struck. A new method of thinking hath arisen. All plans, proposals, and see. I've never seen... Oh, no, don't... And see. I've never seen something written like this. Has got to be a not so common thing. An abbreviation in Latin which means and other things and so forth. I've never seen this abbreviation before. And so forth prior to the 19th of April, i.e. the commencement of hostilities at Lexington. So this is after Lexington. Are like the almanacs of the last year, which thou proper then are superseded and useless now. So all the stuff that happened before, this is over. The new talk has changed, all the new things. Whatever was advanced by the advocates on either side of that question then terminated in one and the same point, i.e. the shot heard around the world. A union with Great Britain, the only difference between the parties was that of method of effecting it. The one proposing force, the other friendship. But as hath so far happened that the first hath failed, and the second hath withdrawn her influence. As much hath... He really likes that word. As much hath been said of advantages of reconciliation, which, like an agreeable dream, hath passed away and left us as we were. It is but right that we should examine the contrary side of the argument and inquire into some of the many material injustices which these colonies sustain and always will sustain by being connected with and dependent on Great Britain. To examine the connection and dependence on the principles and nature of common sense, to see what we have trust to do if separated, what we are to expect if dependent. Okay, so he's just lining out what he's going to argue about as he goes on. Let's see what he says. I have heard it asserted by some that as America has flourished under her former connection with Great Britain, the same connection is necessary towards her future happiness and will always have the same effect. Nothing can be more fallacious than this kind of argument. I really love how straight to the point he is. He's like, oh, everybody says Great Britain is a great connection. Bullshit. It's like you can just read it. You can translate him to like today's language like so easily. Just like go, yeah, my ass. We may as well assert that because a child has thrived upon milk, that it is never that it is never to have meat, or that the first 20 years of our lives is to become a precedent for the next 20. Just because it was doesn't mean it will be. But even this is admitting more than is true, for I answer roundly that America would have flourished as much and probably much more had no European power taken any notice of her. The commerce by which she hath enriched herself are the necessities of life, and will always have a market, while eating is the custom of Europe. So he's saying that trade, market, are just in commerce by which she has enriched herself. This is the same thing as eating as it is to a European. Interesting. But she hath protected us, to say some, that she hath engrossed us is true, and defended the continent at our expense as well as her own, is admitted, and she would have defended Turkey from the same motive, for the sake of trade and dominion. So he's saying, well, but Britain has protected us. And he's like, well, sure, but England would have also protected Turkey if it was for her own benefit, and that that's not special for us. That doesn't make our relationship with Britain special at all. Alas! Exclamation point. We have been long led away from ancient prejudices and made large sacrifices to superstition. We have boasted that protection of Great Britain without considering that her motive was interest, not attachment. And that she did not protect us from our enemies on our account, but from her enemies on her account. From those who had no quarrel with us on any other account, and who will always be our enemies on the same account. Let Britain waive her pretensions to the continent, or the continent throw off her dependence, and that we should be at peace with France and Spain. Were they at war with Britain, their miseries of Hanover last war ought to warn us against connection. So, why should France and Spain be our enemy? Those are enemy. Those are Britain's enemies. Let us stop pretending that we are Britain, and let Britain be their enemies, not us. All right. Makes sense. It hath lately been asserted that in Parliament that the colonies have no relations to each other but through parent country, i.e., Pennsylvania and the Jerseys. I like that. I've never heard. And so on. For the rest are sister colonies by the way of England. This is certainly a very roundabout way of providing relationship, but it is the nearest and only true way of providing enmity, or enemyship, if I may so call it. A little turn of phrase. France and Spain never were, nor perhaps ever will be, our enemies as Americans, but as our being subjects of Great Britain. So he's kind of saying what he said again, and that, and lately been asserted that in Parliament, so in the British Parliament, the colonies don't have any relation to each other. They are the only reason they have any relationship for it is because they are colonies of England. And then he goes on and saying, "Well, that's a bunch of bull." Oh. All right. But Britain is the parent country, say some, then the more shame upon her conduct. Even brutes do not devour their young, nor savages make war upon their families. Wherefore the assertion, if true, turns to her reproach, but it happens not to be true, or only partly so, and the phrase parent or mother country hath been judiciously adopted by the king and his parasites with a low papistical, so papal, design of gaining an unfair bias on the credulous. Yeah, I've only seen that word as incredulous. I didn't know there was a credulous weakness of our minds. Europe and not England is the parent country of America. This new world hath been the asylum for the persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty from every part of Europe. Hither have fled not from the tender embraces of their mother, but from the cruelty of their mother. And it is so far true of England that the same tyranny which drove the first immigrants from home pursue their descendants still. So he's saying, yeah, England's not America's home, like mom anymore. All of Europe is. All the kind of lost children of Europe are now the children, and it wasn't some loving mother that sent us here. We were running from an abusive, bitchy mom. In the extensive quarter of the globe, we forget that the narrow limits of 360 miles, the extent of England, and carry our friendship on a larger scale. We claim brotherhood with every European Christian and triumph of the generosity of the sentiment. Just continuing on. It is pleasant to observe by what regular gradiation we surmount the force of local prejudices as we enlarge our acquaintance with the world. A man born in any town in England, divided into parishes, will naturally associate most with his fellow parishioners because their interest may be, in many cases, will be common. So the man you're born next to, you will have more in common with than in the next parish, and distinguish him by the name of neighbor. If he meet him but a few miles from home, he drops the narrow idea of a street and salutes him by the name of townsman. If he travels out of the country and meet him in another, he forgets the minor divisions of street and town and calls himself countryman. But if in their foreign excursions they should associate in France or in any part of Europe, their local remembrance would be enlarged to that of Englishmen, and by that just parity of reasoning of all Europeans by meeting in America or any other quarter among the globe are countrymen. For England, Holland, Germany, or Sweden, when it compares to the whole, stand in the same places on the larger scale, which the divisions of street, town, and country do on smaller ones. Distinctions too limit for continental minds. Not 1/3 of the inhabitants, even of the province, Pennsylvania, are of English descent. Wherefore I reprobate the phrase of parent or mother country applied to England only, as being false, selfish, narrow, and ungenerous. So he's saying this is already happening. Like before America's arguing, he's like, look, we're not English anymore. Only 1/3 of Pennsylvania are English. And this is the first, like, it's kind of interesting because this is the first, like, expansion of what it is to be an American. You know, it's like, first it's like, we're English subjects, and it's like, okay, this is 1766. This is modern days to them. It's like, that's an old thing. It's like, hey, we're barely English anymore. You know, then who do you add after that? They will see. Probably this guy who was like, the Irish, are you kidding? Who knows? But admitting that we were all English of descent, what does it amount to? Nothing. Britain, being now an open enemy, extinguishes every other name and title. And to say that reconciliation is our duty, it is truly farcical. He likes farcical. I do too. I love the word farcical. The first king of England of the present line, William the Conqueror, was a Frenchman, and half the peers of England are descendants from the same country. Wherefore, by the same method of reasoning, England ought to be governed by France. Ooh, burn. Ooh, what a burn to the English. He's like, well, William the Conqueror was French, so if England should own us, then France should own England by that logic. Ooh, I bet the English who read this really didn't like that. Probably a lot of English people didn't read that. Much hath been said to the united strength of Britain and the colonies. That is conjunction that they might bid defiance to the world, but this is mere presumption. The fate of war is uncertain, neither do the expressions mean anything, for this continent would never suffer itself to be drained of inhabitants to support the British arms in either Asia, Africa, or Europe. So he's saying, like, we're not going over there to fight for Britain. We're not going across the world to fight for Britain, no matter what. Besides, what have we have to do with setting the world at defiance? Our plan is commerce, and that, well attended to, will secure us in peace and friendship with all of Europe. He's like, we don't need to worry about the English defending us. We're so good at trade that the Europeans will be happy with us, and that'll be enough security. Because it is the interest of all Europe to have America as a free port, her trade will always be a protection, and her burdens of gold and silver secure from invaders. So this is kind of, this idea still goes on today of like, the best idea for peace is like, be a really good trading partner. Be like, trade will like protect us both from peace, because we don't want to end that. It's really good. It's really beneficial to both of us. This is the end of mercantilism. So the idea of like winner take all kind of like trade is going away, and kind of mutual beneficial trade is starting to take root. Kind of like is seen like as better. This is the beginning of stuff like that. I challenge the warmest advocate for reconciliation to show a single advantage that this continent can reap from connecting with Great Britain. I repeat the challenge. Not a single advocate is derived. Our corn will fetch its price in any market in Europe, and our input goods must be paid for by them where we will. The way he worded that is really, I don't know if it's just his writing style or just the writing style of the time, but sometimes they really word things kind of a way that kind of like tongue twist me. By the injuries and disadvantages which we sustain by our connection are without number, and that our duty to mankind at large, as well as ourselves, instruct us to renounce the. Can I have just like a wider page so not every word is split? Instruct or renounce all alliance, because any submission to our dependence on Great Britain tends directly to involve this continent in European wars and quarrels, and set us at a variance with nations who would otherwise seek our friendship, and against whom we have either anger nor complaint. As Europe is our market for trade, we ought to form no particular connection with any part of it. It is the true interest of America to steer clear of European connections, which she never can do, while by her dependence on Britain she is made the make-weight in the scale of British politics. So he's like, let us not pick a side in these constant British wars. We are a way bigger benefit being neutral. Whew. Europe is too thickly plated with the kingdoms to be long at peace, and whenever a war breaks out between England and any foreign power, the trade of America goes to ruin because... Oh, okay, good. Let's see. Did it save my spot? Please tell me it saved my spot. Okay. Can I get this on full screen? That would be much nicer. The next war may not turn out like the last, and should it not, the advocates for reconciliation now will be wishing for separation then, because neutrality in the case would be a safer convoy than a man of war. Everything that is right or reasonable pleads for separation. The blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature cries, "'Tis time to part." Even the distance at which the Almighty hath placed England and America is a strong and natural proof that the authority of one over the other was never the design of heaven. He's pleading to God, like, look how far away. There's no way God wants England to have control over us. The time, likewise, at which the continent was discovered adds weight to the argument, and the manner in which it was peopled increases the force of it. The Reformation was preceded by the discovery of America, as if the Almighty graciously meant to open the sanctuary of the persecuted in the future years, when home should afford neither friendship nor safety. All right, so it's making a religious argument here. I'm not going to comment on the religious argument that he's making. The authority of Great Britain over the continent is a form of government which sooner or later must have an end, and a serious mind can draw no true pleasure by looking forward under the painful and positive conviction that what he calls the present constitution is merely temporary. As parents, we can have no joy knowing that this government is not sufficiently lasting to enjoy anything which may be bequeathed to posterity. Oh. All right, hold on. I'm going to see. 44. I just want to see how long this chapter is. So I have been very sick lately. Oh my gosh. All right, we're going for it. This is all I'm going to do for stream tonight. Just read this part. Oh. All right. And by a plain method of argument, as we are running the next generation into debt, we ought to do the work of it. Otherwise, we use them meanly and pitifully. In order to discover the line of our duty rightfully, we should take our children in our hand and fix our station a few years farther into life. That eminence will present a prospect which few present fears and prejudice conceal from our sight. Though I would carefully avoid giving an unnecessary offense, yet I am inclined to believe that all those who espouse the doctrine of reconciliation may be included with the following descriptions. All right, so he's going to give some I think he's about to talk some shit. Interested men who are not to be trusted, weak men who cannot see, prejudiced men who will not see, and the certain set of moderate men who think better of the European world than it deserves. And this last class, by an ill-judged deliberation, will be the cause of more calamities to the continent than all the other three. Ooh, all right. He's going to go to each one and talk shit about each one. It is for good fortune of many to live distant from the scene of present sorrow. The evil is not sufficiently brought to their doors to make them feel precariousness with which all American prosperity is possessed. But let our imaginations transport us a few moments to Boston. That seat of wretchedness will teach us wisdom. Not much has changed. And instruct us forever to renounce a power in whom we can have no trust. The inhabitants of that unfortunate city, but a few months ago, were in ease and affluence, now have no other alternative than to stay and starve, or turn out to beg. Endangered by the fire of their friends, if they continue within the city and plunder by the solidarity, if they leave it in their present situation, they are prisoners without the hopes of redemption, and in a general attack for their relief, they would be exposed to the fury of both armies. So Boston is under occupation, I guess, right there during all this time. Yeah, because that was the first place they occupied. Whew. Men of passive tempers look somewhat lightly over the offenses of Great Britain, and still hoping for the best, are apt to call out, "Come, come, we shall be friends again for all this." But examine the passions and feelings of mankind. Bring the doctrine of reconciliation to the touchstone of nature, and then tell me whether you can hereafter love, honor, and faithfully serve the power that hath carried fire and sword to your land. So I was like, are you really going to go back after all the shit these guys did? If you cannot do all these, then you are not only deceiving yourselves, but by your delay bringing ruin upon prosperity. Your future connection with Britain, whom you can neither love nor honor, will be forced and unnatural, and being formed only on the plan of present convenience, will in little time fall into a relapse of more wretched than the first. But if you say you can still pass the violations over, then I asked, hath your house been burnt? Hath your property been destroyed before your face? Are your wife and children destitute of a bed or lie on the ground or a bread to live on? Have you lost a parent or child by their hands, and yourself ruined and the wretched survivor? If you have not, then you are not to judge those who have. Like, hey, shut up unless you've actually lost something. But if you have, and you can still shake hands with the murderers, then you are unworthy of the name of husband, father, friend, or lover. Damn, Thomas Paine, you are just spitting facts at these guys. Ooh. May be your rank or title in life, you have the heart of a coward and the spirit of a sycophant. Oh. You know what? I think after I'm done reading this, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to go find all his like best burns. I'm like save them to like a good Word document for like Twitter arguments and shit. People start talking shit on Twitter. Be like, you have the heart of a coward and the spirit of a sycophant. That's just so good. Oh man, that like somebody calls you a slur in the comments. It's like, man, you can just own them with that. This is not inflaming or exaggerating matters, but trying them by those feelings and affections which nature justifies, and without which we should be incapable of discharging the social duties of life, or enjoying the I need a pronunciation help. Come on. I don't need
pronouncenames.com.
I hate this.
Félicité.
Felicite. Okay, of course. But I'm guessing just Felicite of it. I mean not to exhibit horror for the purpose of provoking revenge, but to awaken us from fatal and unmanly slumbers, that we may pursue determinedly some fixed object. 'Tis not the power of Britain or of Europe to conquer America, if she doth not conquer herself by delay or timidity. The present winter is worth an age of rightly employed. But if lost or neglected, the whole continent will partake of the misfortune, and there is no punishment which man doth not deserved. Be he who or what or where he will, that may not be the means of sacrificing a season so precious and useful. All right. Whew. Tis repugnant to reason, to the universal order of things, to all examples from former ages, to suppose that this continent can long remain subject of any external power. The most sanguine in Britain doth not think so. The utmost stretch of human wisdom cannot, at this time, compass a plan short of separation which can promise the continent even a year's security. Reconciliation is now a fallacious dream. He loves fallacious. Nature hath deserted the connection, and art cannot supply her place. For, as Milton wisely expresses, never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate had pierced so deep. Like, we're in too deep, boys. We can't go back. So stop pretending. Every quiet method for peace has been ineffectual. Our prayers have been rejected with disdain, and hath tended to convince us that nothing flatters vanity or confirms obstinacy in kings more than repeated petitioning, and nothing hath contributed more than that very measure to make the kings of Europe absolute. Witness Denmark and Sweden. Wherefore, since nothing but blows will do, for God's sakes, let us come to a final separation, and not leave the next generation to be cutting throats under the violated, unmeaning names of parent to child. He's like, let's us do the sacrifice. Let's not push this to the next generation. To say they will never attempt it again is idle and visionary. We thought so at the repeal of the Stamp Act, yet a year or two undeceived us, as well as many suppose that nations which hath once defeated will never renew the quarrel. All right. Like, it's like, again, let's just keep going. Like, let's keep doing this. We're just going to have to do it again later. As the government matters, 'tis not in the power of Britain to do this continent justice. The business of it will soon be too weighty and intricate to be managed with any tolerable degree of convenience. By the power is so distant from us, and so very ignorant of us, for if they cannot conquer us, they cannot govern us. To be always running 3,000 or 4,000 miles with a tale of perdition, waiting for 4 or 5 months for an answer, which when obtained requires 4 or 5, 6 more to explain it, and will in a few years be looked upon as folly and childish. There was a time when it was proper, and there was a proper time for it to so cease. Boom. They're too far. They're too ignorant. They don't know what's going on. We can't deal with this bullshit anymore. All right. Small islands not capable of protecting themselves are the proper objects for government to take under their care, but there is something absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. Oh, just a fucking straight up burn on Britain. Like, we're a continent, you're an island. You don't get to govern us. If anything, we should be governing you. In no instance hath nature made the satellite larger than the primary planet. And as England and America, with respect to each other, reverse the common order of nature, it is evident that they belong to different systems. England to Europe, America to itself. I am not induced by motives of pride, party, or resentment to espouse the doctrine of separation and independence. I am clearly, positively, and concisely persuaded that it is the true interest of this continent to do so, that everything short of that is mere patchwork, that it can afford no lasting felicity, that it is leaving the sword to our children and shrinking back at the time when little more and little further would have rendered this continent the glory of the earth. As Britain hath not manifested the least inclination towards compromise, we may as assured be there no terms that can be obtained worthy of acceptance of the continent, or of any ways equal to the expense of blood and treasure which we had already put to. So, the British haven't manifested inclination to, like, they're not compromising. We should stop pretending like they're going to, because this part is directed at the people that are like, oh, we need to talk this out with Britain. He's like, it's too late. He's probably going to keep going that for a while. The object contended for ought always bear some just proportion to the expense. The removal of the North or the whole detestable junto. Is this like a junta?
Junto.
A political grouping or faction. Okay. All right, sorry. As a matter of unworthy millions we have expended, a temporary stoppage of trade was an inconvenience which would have sufficiently balanced the repeal of all the acts complained of, had such repeals been obtained. But if the whole continent must take up arms, if every man must be a soldier, 'tis scarcely worth our while to fight against a contemptible ministry only. Dearly do we pay for the repeal of the acts, if that is all we fight for. In a just estimation, this was a great folly to pay a Bunker Hill price for the laws as for land, as I have always considered the independency of this continent as an event which sooner or later must arrive. So from the late rapid progress of the continent to maturity, the event cannot be far off. Wherefore, on the breaking out of hostilities, it was not worth the while to have disputed the matter, which time would have finally redressed, unless we meant to be in earnest. Otherwise, it is like wasting an estate on the suit at law to regulate the trespasses of a tenant whose lease is just expiring. No man was a warmer wisher for the reconciliation than myself before the fatal 19th of April, 1975, which was Lexington. But the moment the event of that day was made known, I rejected the hardened, sullen-tempered Pharaoh of England forever, and the disdain of the wretch that with the pretended title of father of the people can unfeelingly hear to the slaughter and compose sleep with their blood upon his soul. By admitting that matters were now made up, what would be the event? I answer the ruin of the continent, and that for several reasons. So he does say something here that's really interesting, that I find really interesting. I don't want to go back and read it. Temporary stoppage of trade was an inconvenience. Okay. I had such repeals been obtained. So, if the these acts, like, it wouldn't, like, the trade would have fixed these acts really quickly if that was a problem. But like after Bunker Hill, after Lexington, like, blood's been spilled. Like, that's not enough anymore. The repeal of this stuff, it's not enough anymore. All right. By admitting the matters we have made up, what would be an event? I answer to the Rubicon for several reasons. All right, what's the first reason? The powers of government still remain in the hands of the king. He will have a negative over the whole legislation of this continent. And as he hath shown himself such an inveterate. All right, there's a lot of words that I am just.
Inveterate.
Having a particular habit of interesting of long establishing like a chains. All right, so he's unmoving enemy to liberty and discovering such a thirst for arbitrary powers. Is he, or is he not, a proper person to say to these colonies, "You shall make no laws but what I please"? Oh, talking shit about the king and his arbitrary laws. And is there still any inhabitant of America so ignorant as to not know that according to what is called present constitution, this continent can make no laws but what the king gives leave to? So what's the point of us being able to make laws if it's only laws he allows us to make? And is there any man so unwise as to not see that, considering what has happened, he will suffer no law to be made here such as suits his purpose? We may be as effectually enslaved by the want of laws in America as submitting to laws made for us in England. After matters are made up, as it is called, can there be any doubt but the whole power of the crown will be exerted to keep this continent as low and humble as possible? Instead of going forward, we shall go backward, or be perpetually quarreling, or ridiculously petitioning. We are already greater than the king wishes us to be, and will he not hereafter endeavor to make us less, to bring the matter to one point? Is the power who is jealous of our prosperity a proper power to govern us? Whether he says no to this question as an independent, for independency means no more than this: whether we shall make our own laws, or whether the king, the greatest enemy this continent hath, or can have, shall tell us there shall be no laws but such as I like. It's like, we're already bigger and more badass than the king wants us to be. So if we give up now, he's going to make us less powerful and influential than we already are. But the king, you say, has a negative in England with the people there can make no laws without his consent. In point of right and good order, it is something very ridiculous that the youth of 21, which hath often happened, shall say to several million of people older and wiser than himself, I forbid this, or is that the act of yours to be law? But in this place I decline this sort of reply, though I will never cease to expose the absurdity of it, and only answer that the England being the king's residence and America not so makes quite another case. The king's negative here is 10 times more dangerous and fatal than it can be in England, for there he will scarcely refuse his consent to a bill for putting England into as strong a state of defense as possible. In America, he would never such a bill to be passed. America is only a secondary object in this system of British policies. England consults the good of this country no further than it answers her own purpose. So I don't like being second place. Wherefore her own interest leads her to suppress the growth of ours in every case, doth no promote her advantage, or in the least interferes with it. A pretty state we should soon be under such a second-hand government, considering what has happened. Men do not change from enemies to friends by the alteration of a name. And in order to show that reconciliation now is a dangerous doctrine, I affirm that it would be the policy of the king at this time to repeal the acts for the sake of reinstating himself in the government of the province, in order that he may shall accomplish by craft and subtlety in the long run what he cannot do by force and violence in the short run. Reconciliation and ruin are nearly related. So he's saying, like, they're just going to do the same thing again. If we reconcile now, there's no way they don't go back and do the same thing again. Whew. Secondly, I forgot that whole thing was just the first part. Secondly, that even in the best terms which can expect to obtain, the amount to no more than temporary expedient, or a kind of government by guardianship, which can no longer till the colonies come of age. So the general face and the state of things in the interim will be unsettled and unpromising. Immigrants of property will not choose to come to a country whose form of government hangs by a thread, and who is an everyday tottering on the brink of commotion and disturbance, and the number of present inhabitants would lay hold of interval and dispose of their effects and quit the continent. But the most powerful of all the arguments is that nothing but independence, i.e. a continental form of government, can keep the peace of the continent and preserve it inviolate from civil wars. I dread the event of reconciliation with British now, as it is more than a problem that will be followed by a revolt somewhere or other. By some revolt somewhere or another, the consequences of which may be far more fatal than the malice of Britain. Thousands are already ruined by British barbarity. Thousands more will probably suffer the same fate. Those men have other feelings other than us, who have nothing suffered. All they now possess is liberty. What they before enjoyed is sacrificed to its service, and by having nothing more to lose than disdain and submission. Besides, the general temper of the colonies towards the British government will be like that of the youth who is nearly out of his time. They will care very little about her, and a government which cannot preserve the peace is no government at all. And in that case, we pay our money for nothing, and pray what it is that Britain can do, whose power will be wholly on paper, should a civil tumult break out in the very day after reconciliation. I have heard men say, many of whom I believe spoke without thinking, that they dreaded an independence, fearing that it would produce civil wars. But it is seldom that the first thoughts are truly correct. And that is the case here, for there are 10 times more to dread from a patched-up connection than from an independence. I make the sufferer's case my own, and I protest that were I driven from my house and home, and property destroyed, and my circumstances ruined, that a man sensible of injuries, I could never relish the doctrine of reconciliation, or consider myself bound thereby. So he's saying, like, he's addressing people that's saying, like, okay, us being split is more likely to cause conflict between us. And he's saying, like, maybe, but we know that there's conflict by reconciliation. So things known, things not. The colonies have manifested such a spirit of good order and obedience to the continental government as it is sufficient to make every reasonable person easy and happy on that head. No man can assign the least pretense for his fears or any other grounds than such are truly childish and ridiculous, that one colony will be striving for superiority over another. Where there are no distinctions, there can be no superiority. Perfect equity affords no temptation. The republics of Europe are all, and we may very say always, in peace. Holland and Switzerland are not without wars, foreign or domestic. Monarchical governments, it is true, are never long at rest. The crown itself is a temptation to enterprising ruffians at home, and that degree of pride and insolence tenant on real authority swells into rupture with foreign powers, an instance where a republic, by being formed on a more natural principles, would negotiate on the mistake. So he's saying republics are more likely to negotiate than a monarchy would, because you don't have to worry about pride being and insolence being a pretext for war easily, because even if it's Holland and Switzerland, which are republics, are he says without word. He's being a little optimistic here. But it is true that there is two less reasons that a republic would go to war than a monarchy. If there is any true cause of fear respecting independence, it is because no plan is yet laid down. Men do not see their way out. Wherefore, as an opening into business, I offer the following hints, at the same time modestly affirming that I have no other opinion of them myself, other than that they may be the means of giving rise to something better. Could the straggling thoughts of individuals be collected, they would frequently form materials for wise and able men to improve into useful matter. Oh, I'm getting really stuffy. Let the assemblies be annual, with the president only, the representation more equal, their business wholly domestic, and the subject the authority of the Continental Congress. Let each colony be divided into 6, 8, or 10 convenient districts, each district to send a proper number of delegates to Congress, so that each colony send at least 30. The whole number of Congress should be at least 390. Each Congress to sit and choose president by the following methods. So he's going to lay out his choice for how the Congress should be working, which I don't know how close he is. Each Congress to sit and choose a president by the following method. So this is a parliamentary method. So they did not go with his, but all right. When the delegates are met, let the colony be taken from the whole 13 colonies by lot, after which let the Congress choose by ballot a president from out of the delegates of that province. In the next continent, let a colony be taken by lot from 12 only, omitting that colony from which the president was taken in the former Congress. And proceeding on to the whole 13, shall we have the proper rotation? I'm not going to get into this. We didn't really go with this at all. But it's an interesting thing of, like, your state had the president last time. You can't be president this time. You had a president last time. Ah, dang it. A committee of 26 members. Is he still talking about this? Okay, yeah, I am not going to get into deep on his. Uh, okay, screen freedom. All right, I think he's getting out of the weeds here. Maybe. All right, let's go. Let's skip ahead a little. Always remembering that our strength is continental, not provincial. He's like, we are stronger together. Stop bickering as little tiny colonies. Securing freedoms and the prosperity to all men, and above all things, the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of consciousness, with such other matters as it is necessary for the charter to contain. Immediately after which, the said conference is to dissolve, and the bodies of which shall be chosen comfortably to said charter, to the legislators and government of this continent for the time being. Whose peace and happiness may God preserve. Amen. Yeah, they'll pray at the end. Should any body of men be hereafter delegates of the similar purpose, I offer them the following extracts from the wise observer on the governments. Dragonetti. The science says, he says, of the political constants in the fixing of true point happiness of freedom, those men who would deserve gratitude of ages, who should discover a mode of government that contained the greatest sum of individual happiness with the least national expense. Okay. But where, say some, is the king of the America? I tell you, friend, he reigns above and doth not make havoc of mankind like the royal brute in Britain. Ooh, snap. Dude, this guy is just... He's constant with the British snapbacks. They're like, where's the king? God's king. Oh, that's the only king, bitch. Ooh. Yeah. Yet that we may not appear to be defective even in earthly honors, let a day be solemnly set apart for proclaiming the charter. Let it be brought forth and placed upon the divine law, the word of God. Let the crown be placed thereon, by which the world may know that so far as we approve of monarchy, that in America the law is king. For as in absolute governments the king is law, so in free countries the law ought to be king. Dang. And there ought to be no other, but lest any ill use should afterwards arise. Let the crown at the conclusion of the ceremony be demolished, and the scattering among the people whose right it is. The government of our own is our natural right. And when a man seriously reflects on the precariousness of human affairs, he will become convinced that it is infinitely wiser and safer to form a constitution of our own in a cool, deliberate manner while we have it in our power, than to trust such an interesting event to time and chance. If we omit it now, some... What the heck? Some Macelano? Otherwise, a fisherman in Naples who, after spiriting up his countrymen in the public marketplace against the oppression of the Spaniards, to whom that place is became a king. Okay. He's like, all right, we got to make a constitution before somebody sucks it up and becomes king. All right. All right. 2 more pages. All right, laying hold of popular disquietudes. This is an old word.
Disquietude.
Disquietude. Ooh. May collect together in the desperate and the discontented, and by assuming themselves in the powers of government, finally sweep away the liberties of the continent like a deluge. Should the governments of America return again into the hands of Britain, the tottering situation of things will be temptation for the desperate adventurer to try his fortune. And in such a case, what relief can Britain give? Ere she could hear the news, the fatal businesses might be done, and ourselves suffering like the wretched Britons under the oppression of the conqueror. Ye that oppose independence now, ye know what you do. Ye are opening the door to eternal tyranny. I wonder if he switched to the ye's. By keeping vacant the seat of government, there are thousands and tens of thousands who would think it glorious to expel from the continent that barbarous and hellish powers which hath stirred up the Indians and the, not going to say that on Twitch, to destroy us. The cruelty hath a double guilt. It is dealing brutality by us and treacherously by them. To talk friendship with those in whom our reason forbids us to have faith, and our affections wounded through 1,000 pores instruct us to detest, is madness and folly. Every day wears out the little remains of kindred between us and them. Can there be any reason to hope that as the relationship expires, the affection will increase, or that we shall agree better when we have times more and greater concerns to quarrel over than ever? Ye that tells us of harmony and reconciliation, can you restore to us the time that is past? Can you give prostitution its former innocence? Neither can you reconcile Britain and America. Oh man, that is a dark sentence. Can you give a prostitute their innocence? Well, no, and you can't reconcile Britain and America. The last cord is now broken. The people of England are presenting addresses against us. There are injuries which nature cannot forgive. She would cease to be nature if she did. As well can the lover forgive the ravisher of his mistress as the continent forgive the murderers of Britain. What are you doing, puppies? What are you doing, puppies? Good girl. The Almighty hath implanted us these unextinguishable feelings for good and wise purpose. They are the guardians of his image in our hearts. They distinguish us from the herd of common animals. The social compact would dissolve and the justice be extirpated from the earth, or have only a casual existence where we callous to the touches of affection. The robber and the murderer would often escape unpunished, did not the injuries which our tempers sustain provoke us into justice. Oi, oi, yea, that love, ye that love mankind, ye that dare oppose not only the tyranny but the tyrant, stand forth. Every spot on the old world is overrun with oppression. Freedom hath been hunted around the globe. Asia and Africa have long expelled her. Europe regards her like a stranger, and England hath given her a warning to depart. Oh, receive the fugitive and prepare in time for an asylum for mankind. This feels like this last part was, this is going to be like read out. All right, I think I would read another section, but I have one viewer that is not even talking to me, and I am sick, and my throat hurts. So I think I am going to call it a night. All right. I'm going to pin this. Hopefully, I can remember my spot. About 2/3 the way through this thing. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. All right. I'm going to call it a night. I had a lot of fun. Oh. Give me a follow if you want to see the next part of this. Get some American. The really sassy guy. He has some of the best burns of the 1700s I've ever seen. He knew how to turn a phrase. Like, I need to really go back through this. Anyway, all right, calling it a night. Thank you so much.